makers. This is the second card that I'm making for the Tim Holtz Stampers Anonymous 2024 release. And for this one, I'm going to use one of my favorites, the crochet trims and the abstract florals. I'm also going to be using some archival ink. So I have Rustic Wilderness, Fired Brick, and Kitsch Flamingo out. I'm not sure exactly which ones I'm going to use. I also pulled my Antique Linen Distress ink and Antique Linen Distress Embossing Glaze. And I have some masking paper. So this is a roll of masking paper, so it's sticky on one side like a sticky note. And I bought this long time ago from Judykins, so I don't know if they still sell this, but I will link below in the description for this video, as well as on my blog, to some masking paper that they do have. Now, my plan for this, I've sketched it out, and you know, last time I did the St. Patrick's Day card, and so this is just going to be a card for maybe just to give someone that you love. It could be Valentine's, you know, since I'm doing out of season cards, whatever. But I want to stamp and emboss the crochet trims onto the background of the card with the antique linen and the antique linen embossing glaze, just so it's kind of a pretty feminine, lacy background. And then over it, I want to have kind of a cluster of this. It looks kind of like a rosebud to me a little bit, with a couple of leaves behind it. And so that's where the masking paper comes in, because I am going to stamp this rosebud in front, and then I'm going to mask it off, and I'm going to stamp the leaves behind it, so that it just kind of looks like a little, like a bouquet that you might give to someone. And then the sentiment I'm going to use is love you, and that will be down kind of in my plan in the bottom here. So let's go ahead and get started and see how close to my sketch that I can get. So let's get started making. I began by putting a piece of distressed watercolor cardstock in my stamp platform, and I'm inking up the stamp with Rustic Wilderness Distress Archival ink, and I'm just doing the leaves and the stem in the green. And for the flower, I did a layer of Kitsch Flamingo with a little bit of Barn Door red, and so that was for the flower. And then I decided I wanted the stamens in a different color, so I pulled out my fossilized amber, and so I have yellow stamens. And then I cut a piece of my masking paper, and I just stamped the leftover ink onto there since I'm cutting it out. And I also wanted to do one leaf at least, just in case I wanted to mask off one of the leaves as well, and I would have that. So then I fussy cut around it, and I did this very quickly. I really didn't cut out any details, just cut right along the lines. And the leaves were a little, you know, they're abstract, so you just cut the best you can. And you can see that that goes very quickly. So now I can mask off my flower, and I can start stamping those leaves and getting them positioned where I want them. So I think I realized that I was missing a magnet right there. But now I am inking up the leaf in the Rustic Wilderness Archival ink, just like the stems. I wanted the details to be nice and dark so that when I go back later and I watercolor in with lighter colors, that those details really still stand out. All right, so I decided against a third set of leaves, and that's what the finished product looks like. Now, before you watercolor, you want to make sure your archival inks are nice and dry, and then choose some distress inks to watercolor in. I chose Abandoned Coral for my flower, and so I just put a little smush there on my work surface, and I'm just going in with my water brush, filling that in quickly. Then I replaced the abandoned coral with some greens. I have peeled paint, shabby shutters, and mowed lawn. And I used a different color for the flower leaves than I used for the background. I used more mowed lawn on the background leaves. And then you didn't see me dry it, but I did dry it. And now I am just fussy cutting that out very quickly. As you know, Simon Says Stamp does have exclusive dies for each of the stamp sets for this release. That wouldn't necessarily help you with this card, but it would work if you wanted to cut the pieces out individually with the dies and then layer them together. For the background, I took a piece of distress watercolor cardstock and sprayed it with some antique linen distress spray. And now I'm going over it with that anti-static powder. And I went ahead and decided to stamp in embossing ink instead of the antique linen. So I inked up and you can see that I've just left all of the crochet trims on the card, and I am just stamping it face down. I used a little wood block to make sure it was even. And now I'm just covering the whole thing with antique linen distress embossing powder. I'm going to put that back into the container so none of it goes to waste. And then I heat embossed it so it's all shiny and went around the edge with distress ink. And I think that's looking great. Now I need to work on my sentiment, so I'm going to go ahead and stamp it with Distress Archival in Ground Espresso. Then I'm going to trim out that little excess on the end, and I want to add something to raise it up above the flower. What you can't see is that I have chipboard behind the flower, and so I'm going to cut some chipboard to also put behind my sentiment. And I'm going to put one long piece to go behind it to raise it up. But because the flower is already on chipboard, I have a second piece that's going to go behind that far right side because I'm going to overlap it onto the flower on the left side, just like that. So now it will be even. So this is a mini slimline sized card, and I am showing you that I sewed around the outside edge of it off camera just with some cream thread and my sewing machine. So I'm going to go ahead and put that on my mini slimline card and just kind of pressing it down. Now I'm showing you that I took a bunch of little chipboard strips and put that behind my bouquet off camera, and then that is going to give us some dimension because it's raised up off the background. And then I'm showing you that side that I added the extra piece to so that my sentiment is even across the front of the card, and that's it. Here it is. And I actually think that came together a lot faster than I thought it was going to, and I love it. Exactly what I had planned out in my mind. And so here is my sketch just to remind you, and I think that it's pretty darn close to what I had planned out, so I'm very happy. A couple of changes that I made. Number one is that I was going to, so I took just some watercolor, as I said before, watercolor cardstock, colored it with a little antique linen, and then I was going to stamp it with antique linen, and I tried it off camera and it didn't work as well as I wanted it to, so I used my distress embossing ink instead, and then went ahead and embossed it with the antique embossing glaze, and I really love the look of it. So you can just kind of see that little bit of shine, hopefully, and also the texture that gives. So it gives it just a bit of a raised texture, which is what I wanted as well. Really love it. Then you may have noticed that I did a step. I tried to show you in the video. I did a step when putting the flowers on and the sentiment, and that's because I wanted them raised up a little bit off of the crochet trims background. So you can see that they're raised up. This is raised up once and this is raised up twice. I would recommend for you that you just use some foam tape or foam dots or something like that. Much easier. But for me, these are going to Stampers Anonymous. And if you have ever been to the Stampers Anonymous booth at one of the shows that they attend, you will know that Ted and the team have these card samples up on boards, and they get taken down and put up and put in trucks, and they go through all kinds of weather across the United States for the different shows. So they need to be able to withstand a lot of that. And so for me, the best thing I have found over the years, after having a couple of fails that I noticed at some shows, so is that I just use chipboard, because then I can use the collage medium, which won't allow it to go anywhere. I mean, the whole card will be torn up before any of this stuff falls off. I did go ahead and just do a quick stitch around the outside edge. I considered stitching between all of the crochets, and I did try that on the sample one that I did off camera to practice stamping this and embossing it, and I didn't like the way that it took away from the crochet trims. I really wanted the trims to stand out, and so I just did a simple stitch around the edge. So clean and simple card. I love it, and I hope you do too. So thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, you know what to do. Go ahead and leave a comment on this video or on my blog at playswellwithpaper.blogspot.com. I'll be very happy to answer them. If you would like anything that I used to make this card, I have them linked in the description for this video, as well as on my blog with my affiliate links. And I think that's just about it. So again, thank you so much for watching, and I want to wish you a very creative day.